What happens when you're a terrified 12-year-old Lakota boy performing in your first sacred buffalo ceremony in front of 300 people from allied tribes in 1840, and you get so nervous that you perform every single step in reverse order, dancing counterclockwise instead of clockwise, chanting the prayers backwards, placing the sacred offerings in completely wrong positions, but instead of disaster, the buffalo herd changes direction and runs straight toward the hunters for the first time in living memory. The elder medicine men stood frozen in shock. My father's face went white with horror at my mistakes, but the chief of chiefs grabbed my shoulders and declared, "The spirits have shown us a new path through this boy. He has been touched by the thunder beings." And now, 15 years later, I'm responsible for every major buffalo ceremony across the Great Plains, teaching a sacred technique that I created entirely by accident through panic and incompetence. Before I tell you what happened when I tried to recreate my miracle, and almost destroyed our entire spiritual tradition, less than 5% of you will finish this story. If you've ever been thrust into a position you weren't qualified for, if you understand the crushing weight of living up to expectations built on a misunderstanding, if you believe that sometimes the spirits work through our mistakes rather than our perfection, keep reading, because what I learned about the true nature of sacred ceremonies, buffalo wisdom, and my people's survival will change how you see tradition, spirituality, and the thin line between divine intervention and pure dumb luck. My name is Turns the Herd, though that name weighs heavier than the mountains every single day. I was born small hawk in the year the white man calls 1828, in a Lakota band that followed the great buffalo herds across the sacred Black Hills and the endless prairie grasslands. To understand why what happened to me mattered so much, you need to understand what the buffalo meant to us, and I mean truly understand, not the simple version white people tell. The buffalo wasn't just food. The buffalo wasn't just food. From one buffalo we got meat that fed families for weeks, hides for our teepees and clothing, bones for tools and weapons, sinew for thread and bowstrings, horns for ceremonies and containers, hooves for glue, organs for medicine pouches, tail hair for decoration, bladder for water bags, stomach for cooking vessels, dung for fuel. A single buffalo provided 30 different essential resources. The buffalo gave us everything, and in return we honored them with everything we had. But by 1840, things were changing. White traders were coming more frequently, offering money for buffalo hides. Some tribes were beginning to hunt differently, taking only the valuable parts and leaving the rest to rot. The great herds were starting to move in unpredictable patterns, avoiding areas they'd visited for generations. Our elders were worried. They said the buffalo were losing trust in humans, that the sacred balance was breaking, that our children might grow up in a world where the buffalo had disappeared entirely. This fear made our ceremonies more important than ever. The buffalo ceremony wasn't entertainment or superstition. It was our people's way of communicating with the herds, showing respect, asking permission to hunt, promising to use every part, maintaining the covenant between human and animal that kept both species alive. The ceremony had been performed the same way for more generations than anyone could count. Every step had meaning, every word carried power, every gesture was deliberate, and I was about to destroy it completely by doing everything backwards. Let me tell you how a 12-year-old kid who could barely remember his own prayers ended up in the most important spiritual role in Lakota society. It started because of my voice. I had what adults called a voice that carries, naturally loud and clear, the kind that could be heard across vast distances. When I spoke, people turned to listen, even if I was just asking where the food was. This wasn't a skill I'd developed. I was just born with powerful lungs and resonant vocal cords. Our band's main ceremonial singer, Calls to Sky, heard me shouting to my friends one day and immediately grabbed my arm. "Boy, do that again. Louder," I shouted again, confused. His eyes went wide. "You have the voice of the thunder beings. Your sound could reach the buffalo herds from a great distance. You must train to be a ceremonial caller." I was 12 and mostly interested in playing games with my friends, not standing in front of hundreds of people chanting prayers. But you didn't say no to Calls to Sky. He was ancient, respected and slightly terrifying. For 6 months, he trained me in the buffalo ceremony songs. The problem was that the old language, the sacred ceremonies of Lakota, that was different from everyday speech, was incredibly difficult for me. The words were archaic, the pronunciation was precise, and one wrong syllable could change the entire meaning of a prayer. I tried, I really did, but my 12-year-old brain kept mixing up the words, reversing the order of phrases, forgetting which prayer came when. Calls to Sky was patient, but increasingly worried. The great gathering is in 2 months, he reminded me weekly. 5 tribes coming together, 300 people. The biggest buffalo ceremony in 10 years. You must be ready. I'll be ready, I promised, having no idea if that was true. The great gathering was our people's most important event. Every summer, allied Lakota bands came together at a sacred site to perform the unified buffalo ceremony, a massive ritual calling to the great herds, asking for successful hunts, renewing our covenant with the Buffalo Nation. This year was especially crucial because the herds had been acting strangely and everyone was nervous about the future. Calls to Sky would lead the ceremony as head singer, but he wanted me to perform a key section, the call to the 4 directions, where the ceremonial singer calls out to the north, south, east, and west, inviting the buffalo spirits from all corners of the world to witness our respect and hear our prayers. The day of the great gathering arrived. 300 people formed a massive circle on the open prairie. The sun was blazing. The wind was hot. 5 chiefs sat in positions of honor. Medicine men from all the bands wore their full ceremonial regalia. Drummers had their sacred drums ready. Dancers were painted and prepared. This wasn't just important. This was the spiritual center of our entire year, and I was about to perform in front of all of them for the first time in my life. Guys, I need you to stop and feel this moment. Imagine being 12 years old, standing in front of 300 people from multiple tribes, about to perform a sacred ceremony that your entire culture depends on, knowing that you barely remember the words and definitely don't remember the order they go in. Imagine the weight of expectation, the fear of failure, the absolute certainty that you're about to humiliate yourself and disappoint everyone. Comment below if you've ever been thrown into a situation way beyond your abilities. Have you ever had to perform under pressure when you knew you weren't ready? Because this moment, this terrifying, impossible moment, is where my entire fake spiritual career was born. The ceremony began. Drums pounded, the sacred rhythm. Boom, 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 like the heartbeat of the earth. Dancers moved clockwise in the circle, representing the sun's path across the sky. Medicine men placed sacred offerings, tobacco, sage, sweetgrass in the 4 directions. Everything was perfect, precise, exactly as it had been done for countless generations. Then Calls to Sky nodded at me. My turn. I stood up, my legs shaking so badly I thought I might fall. I was supposed to walk to the center of the circle, face north first, and begin the call to the 4 directions in the proper order: north wisdom, east new beginnings, south growth, west endings. Each direction had specific prayers, specific gestures, specific sacred words. I walked to the center. I faced the direction. I thought it was north. It might have been northwest. I wasn't entirely sure, because I was panicking. I opened my mouth to sing the prayer, and my mind went completely blank. I couldn't remember the first word. Not a single word. The drums were beating. 300 people were watching, and I had nothing. In my panic, I just started making sounds. I sang something. Words were coming out of my mouth, but I have no idea what I was saying. I was so nervous that I was basically singing nonsense in the old language, stringing together sacred words I half remembered in whatever order my terrified brain supplied them. Then I realized I was facing the wrong direction. I was supposed to start with north, but I was pretty sure I was facing east. So I turned around counterclockwise, which was wrong. You're supposed to turn clockwise to follow the sun, and faced what I hoped was north. More panic singing, more made-up prayer words. I was supposed to make an offering gesture in each direction, raising sacred sage smoke in a specific pattern. But I forgot which hand to use, which way to move, what the pattern was. So I just waved my arms in what I thought looked ceremonial, probably looking like a bird trying to figure out how to fly. I kept turning counterclockwise wrong to each direction, kept singing prayers in backwards order, kept making gestures that weren't even close to the traditional movements wrong. I was doing everything incorrectly. Every single step was a mistake. I could see Calls to Sky's face in the crowd. He looked horrified. My father looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. Some of the medicine men were whispering to each other, probably debating whether to stop me and spare everyone the embarrassment. But I couldn't stop. I was committed now. I finished my disaster of a performance, turned one final time, still counterclockwise, still wrong, and ended with what I hoped was the closing prayer, but was probably just random ceremonial words mashed together. Silence. 300 people staring at me. The drums had stopped. Even the wind seemed to pause. I had just butchered the most sacred part of our most important ceremony in front of 5 tribes. I wanted to run away and never come back. I wanted to change my name and join a different tribe. I wanted to become a white trader and leave Lakota life entirely. Then something happened that nobody expected. From the north, the direction I'd accidentally faced first instead of last, a massive cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. The elders stood up, shading their eyes, trying to see what was causing it. Buffalo. A huge herd. Hundreds of them. And they were running directly toward us. Buffalo don't do this. Buffalo are cautious, careful, easily spooked. They avoid large human gatherings. They definitely don't run toward humans. But this herd was charging straight at the ceremonial circle, as if answering a call. The herd split around our circle, a river of massive brown bodies flowing around us, so close we could feel the thunder of their hooves through the ground, smell their breath, see the individual hairs on their shaggy coats. It was the most buffalo anyone had seen in one place in years, and they were here, surrounding us, almost like they were participating in the ceremony themselves. The herd slowed, stopped, and formed a loose circle around our gathering, something buffalo simply do not do. They stood there, hundreds of them, watching us with what looked like intelligent awareness, as if waiting for something. Chief Standing Rock stood up slowly, his old face full of wonder and shock. He looked at the buffalo, then at me, then back at the buffalo. "The boy called them," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "He called them in a way we've never seen. He turned against the sun. He called to the north first instead of last. He spoke words we didn't recognize, and the buffalo came. The spirits have shown us through this child that there is more than one way to speak to the Buffalo Nation." The other chiefs nodded slowly, stunned. Medicine men were staring at me like I'd grown wings. My father looked confused but proud. Calls to Sky looked like he was trying to figure out if he'd just witnessed a miracle or a coincidence, so massive it seemed like a miracle. And me, I stood there knowing the absolute truth. I had done everything wrong. The buffalo showing up was pure coincidence, and I had no idea how to recreate whatever had just happened because it hadn't been intentional in the first place. But Chief Standing Rock walked over to me, placed both hands on my shoulders, and said words that would change my entire life. "From this day forward, you are turns the herd. You have been blessed by the thunder beings with a new way of speaking to the buffalo. You will teach us this ceremony. You will lead our people in this sacred work. The spirits have chosen you." I tried to explain. "Honored Chief, I made mistakes. I didn't mean to." "The spirits work through mistakes," he interrupted gently. "Sometimes we must break the old way to find the new way. You have shown us this. Accept your gift." I couldn't refuse a chief. I couldn't refuse a chief. "Mitakuye ate, nitakuye ate, mitakuye ate." So I nodded and accepted my new name, my new role, and the crushing weight of being responsible for something I absolutely didn't understand. The buffalo herd stayed for 3 days. Our hunters had the most successful hunt in tribal memory, and because I'd apparently called the buffalo, they gave me credit for the abundance. Every family had meat, hides, resources. Children who might have gone hungry had food for the winter. The ceremony was declared the most powerful in generations, and I became a legend based entirely on mistakes and incredible coincidence. Over the next weeks, other bands sent messengers asking me to perform my new ceremony for them. I tried to decline. I tried to explain that I didn't actually know what I'd done, but nobody would listen. The spirits speak through you, they insisted. You must share this gift. So I did what any terrified 12-year-old would do. I tried to recreate my mistakes exactly. I turned counterclockwise. I sang prayers in backwards order. I waved my arms in the wrong patterns. I did everything incorrectly on purpose, hoping to trigger whatever had happened before. Sometimes buffalo appeared. Sometimes they didn't. But because they appeared even occasionally, more often than random chance would suggest, people became more convinced that my reverse ceremony was genuinely powerful. By the time I was 15, I was performing buffalo ceremonies across 4 territories. By 17, I was training other ceremonial singers in my technique. By 20, I was the youngest spiritual leader in Lakota history, advising chiefs on hunting strategies and ceremony timing. And every single day, I lived with the knowledge that it had all started with panic, mistakes, and cosmic coincidence. Here's what happened when I finally tried to confess the truth. I was 27 years old, established and respected. I couldn't take the deception anymore. I went to Chief Standing Rock, now ancient but still wise, and told him everything. The panic, the backwards prayers, the accidental movements, the complete lack of intentional spiritual power. He listened carefully, his weathered face unreadable. When I finished my confession, expecting disappointment or anger, he simply smiled. I know, he said quietly. You know? I've always known. So have the other true medicine men. We saw your panic that day. We recognized your mistakes. But we also saw what happened afterward. The buffalo came, not because you followed the rules, but because you broke them with innocence and fear and absolute authenticity. But that was just coincidence, was it? He leaned forward. Young one, let me tell you something about sacred ceremonies. We perform them the traditional way, because tradition works. But tradition works because our ancestors discovered these patterns through trial and error, through mistakes and accidents and moments of panic. The ceremonies we call ancient and perfect were once new and strange. Someone had to discover them by doing something different. A gesture toward the prairie. The buffalo didn't come because you followed rules perfectly. They came because you were completely authentic, terrified, honest, making mistakes without pretense. Animals know the difference between performed spirituality and real emotion. You were more real than any practiced ceremony could be. That's what they responded to. So the backward ceremony actually works. The backward ceremony doesn't work, he corrected. Your authenticity works. Your willingness to stand in the center despite your fear works. Your authenticity works. If you tried to perform the backward ceremony with confidence and practice, it wouldn't have the same power. It works because you're still a little bit terrified every time, still not entirely sure what you're doing, still authentic. I sat with this knowledge trying to understand. So I should keep doing it even though I don't fully understand it? You should keep doing it. Because you don't fully understand it, he said. The moment you think you've mastered speaking to the buffalo spirits is the moment you lose the humility that makes it work. Stay uncertain, stay honest, stay willing to make mistakes. That's the real ceremony. Guys, this changed everything for me. I'd spent 15 years feeling like a fraud, but Chief Standing Rock helped me understand that my fraudulence, my uncertainty, my mistakes, my authenticity was actually the source of whatever power the ceremony had. I kept performing the buffalo ceremonies, but I stopped trying to hide my uncertainty. When young singers asked me to teach them, I told them the truth. I don't fully understand why this works. I'm scared every time. I make mistakes constantly. But I show up authentically, and sometimes that's enough. Some students left, wanting a teacher who claimed to have all the answers. But others stayed, and they became the most powerful ceremonial singers because they learned to embrace uncertainty rather than fake confidence. Over the next years, our people faced incredible challenges. The buffalo herds did decline, as white hunters came with rifles, killing thousands for sport or hides alone. The old ways were threatened, treaties were broken. Our world was changing in ways our ancestors never imagined. But the ceremony continued. Not because it was perfect, or because I was some chosen spiritual genius, but because it reminded us of our relationship with the buffalo, with the land, with each other. Even as the herd shrank, even as our traditional life became harder, the ceremony kept us connected to who we were. I'm 43 years old now, as I tell you this story. I've performed the buffalo ceremony hundreds of times. Sometimes the buffalo come, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the hunts are successful, sometimes they fail. But I've learned that the ceremony's power isn't in controlling outcomes. It's in maintaining connection, honoring relationship, staying authentic. The sacred technique I accidentally discovered through panic and mistakes. It taught me that spirituality isn't about perfect performance. It's about showing up honestly, even when you're terrified, even when you don't know what you're doing, even when you make mistakes. Here's what I learned. The spirits don't need our perfection. They need our authenticity. The buffalo don't respond to practice ceremony. They respond to genuine respect, honest fear, real emotion. And sometimes the most powerful medicine comes not from doing everything right, but from doing everything wrong with complete sincerity. If this story moved you, share it. Share it. If you've ever succeeded by accident, share it. If you've ever been given a responsibility you didn't feel qualified for, share it. If you've ever been given a responsibility you didn't feel qualified for. And remember, your mistakes might be your medicine. Your uncertainty might be your strength. Your willingness to stand in the center despite your fear might be the most powerful ceremony you ever perform. That is my story. That is how I learned the sacred buffalo ceremony, by doing everything backwards, and became a spiritual leader through panic and cosmic coincidence. And I would do it all again because it taught me that the spirits work through our brokenness as much as our strength. To the buffalo who came that day, thank you for teaching me that authenticity calls to you more than perfect performance. To Chief Standing Rock, who knew the truth and let me discover it myself, thank you for understanding that real wisdom comes through mistakes. To every young person thrust into a role they don't feel ready for, show up anyway. Be authentic. Make your mistakes with sincerity. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. The ceremony continues. The buffalo remember. And authenticity remains the truest prayer. Comment below. Have you ever succeeded at something by doing it completely wrong? Have you ever been thrust into a role you weren't qualified for and had to figure it out? Share your story of accidental wisdom.